And the saga continues. I have been trying to figure out the proper heights for these points. So I have a spec sheet from GM that shows a set of heights. I also measured my heights, and those are the two heights that are on the sheets that are posted, version 2. And I show the difference. Now, mine kind of clocked up a little bit in the back. They were a little higher in the rear than the GM specs, but the GM spec doesn't really give you any indication if the rocker panels are level when you take that measurement. So if you don't know that, and you normalize, in other words, you set the front point and the back point equal, then my points were pretty close. Having said all that, I've been bugging Scott's Hot Rods, the people that are going to supply the full frame for this, for a couple months now, to give me some indication of where their mounting points are and what they look like, so that I can at least see if they jive to either the set I have from GM or the set that I measured off this car. In space, XY, they all measure pretty good. It's the Z, it's the height that is, there seems to be a lot of differences. So finally Scott's provided me, I think Friday, a sheet that is looks to be another GM spec sheet. And I'll show you that in a minute, with some hand numbers on it and some notes written in Sharpie. So, and yet again, that set is different too. So I took some time, I laid them out in a drawing, just the heights, and compared all three, and I have that drawing. And ultimately, it shows me, I think, where I need to be and to keep my rockers level. It also kind of shows me that I might be overthinking this. There is opportunity there, just because of the way the floor mounts in the body, that there's a lot of leeway there. I mean, you know, I don't know exactly what you can get, but it's quite different in some of these points. So I'm going to switch over to the desktop computer for a few minutes, show you what this is all about, and show you what I ultimately decided to do with my points. Now that the trussing is in there, I got to go back through and double check all these points anyway, just to make sure that I don't have, any deflection or settings on there from the previous deflection. So I'm going to take the time, take that firewall back off, check all these points one more time before I start assembling everything, because now that I have that truss work in there, I'm not getting any deflection. Everything should be pretty natural where it sits. So that is my goal right now. I'm going to take you through, show you what I learned. I really just don't know what to tell you. The specs on these heights are all over the place. Everybody's got a different number. So I'm going mostly by what Scott's Hot Rods sent to me, because I believe that was the sheet they used to set up their jig. It does not appear, however, they have a CAD drawing or anything like that. They just literally built a jig off a body and started building frames from that. So that's kind of where we're at. I'll show you where I end up, but let me just take you through that for a few minutes. It's going to be boring as hell for most people that aren't into this, but if you're looking for this information, like I've searched for months on this, and I can't get a good answer. So I do believe now, between my car, the GM sheet that I have, and the GM sheet that Scott's Hot Rod uses, I think I know what I need to do. But I'll take you through that.
All right, I apologize for the audio on this. I'm working off my laptop, so it's a little rough. Anyway, let's get into what we're seeing here. this is the document that is in the 1968 Camaro and Firebird assembly reference guide. And it has a set of heights for the various points here that you need to pick up and understand when you're jigging up one of these. And that's great. The problem is, like, this one here at the back of the subframe isn't even in this manual. You had to this one, you can see it's handwritten in there because I found it through other sources, but I don't know the validity of that or whatever. So this was my starting point. You can see the mounting points here at the back of the frame. These aren't actually the mounting points. Those are actually reference points, but there's no cross-reference to those either, or anything for that matter. So that's fun. There is also this document floating around out there that kind of shows some of that. But again, those aren't the mounting points here. These are the frame rail reference holes from GM. So, and again, there's no cross dimension. They actually drew a line on this drawing, but didn't give any dimension. And they do have some of the dimensions down through here, which match the GM spec pretty closely. Then I pestered Scott's Hot Rods until they finally gave me this. This is another GM spec, copyright 68, George Liskey. Now, I've seen this floating around too. It seems to have different numbers than the two GM specs that I saw. It does give some reference to the actual mounting point versus the reference point up here, which is good. It gives some cross dimension to the reference point, but not the mounting point. You can see they penciled in here or sharpied in some of the dimensions for the actual mounting point. I'm assuming this is the document they use to fabricate their jig for their frame setup. This did not come without surprises, however. You can see here, and this is the first I'd heard of this, they actually want you to remove part of that rear frame rail. So that gives me a little bit of heartburn here, is I'm not going to go and assemble all that, have it all welded in, only to cut it back out. So I'm going to have to get clever about that. It is nice in a way, like the Roadster Shop, they have really cool frame rails too, and theirs just bolt on to the chassis as is. Problem is, they get pretty low through here. You don't get a lot of clearance. This should tuck it right up in nice. So in a way, I think it's going to be good, and in another way, I'm a little concerned about how I'm going to deal with it. They don't have any mounting points down in here, so I may add that. Just because I think that's a long way to go from here all the way back to here without any positive contact with the chassis. Anyway, I digress. The overall outlook here is just another confusing set of points. So in trying to get my head around this, I ultimately said to myself, I need to map this out. So to get this straight, what I did in my head, what I did was I went in to my CAD package and I made a drawing. And on that drawing, I put the heights of the given reference points for each of the different sources I have. The GM spec sheet I originally had, the one I got from Scott's, and the one that I measured off my car, which was the actual physical dimensions I measured. So you can see how I kind of did that. And all I did was just kind of work it out and put it up as a cylinder, so it shows a point in space over a flat line. So you can see I lined them up here on the firewall point, which is the front one. This is the back of the front subframe here. The blue is the GM original one. The yellow is the one I just got from Scott's, and the red is the one that I measured off the actual car. And you can see they're all pretty close. This is the front of the rear frame rail. And the difference here is not huge. I mean, from this center to this center is 0.44 inches, like 7/16. In the back, however, this is where it gets a little interesting. You can see my measurement. This is the bottom reference point at the rear of the frame rail. This is the shackle mount. So what you get, I'm only off by a 16th here. So my chassis and the Scott's measurements are pretty much spot on. That original GM spec, however, is off by almost it's off by 7/8 of an inch. So that's where it gets a little concerning. And that's what drove me to keep looking. Now I have another set of data from Scott's that seems to match my car almost identical. The one place it is a little different is over here. And I'll show you the Scott's chassis, but I believe the smart thing to do there is stick with the Scott's points, because at the end of the day, where all of this resides, that chassis has to mount to it. And here it's a little higher than mine, a little higher than the GM at the front of the rear frame rail. So I believe the smart play here is going to be to go with the Scott's solution there, because it's important to understand that they have that 4-bar mount back there for the rear end, and it might need a little more clearance. So I'm going with the higher point there. This point up here, I think I'm probably going to go with the Scott's mount as well, because the difference between these 2 points could become fairly critical. Now these aren't, like I said, these aren't off by a ton. The difference between my measurement and the Scott's measurement is almost 3/8 of an inch. So I think we need to let that play out. Again, I've got to be a little careful what I do here. So next I'll take you back and we'll talk one more time about the dimensions. All right, so this is the rear of this Scott's chassis that I've ordered. They did give me the width of this rear frame rail section. He said I might have a little bit of interference in here I have to contend with, but they've lowered this recently, so it's not as bad. So I don't know what I'm into there. Probably won't until the chassis turns up. But this is where I think I just need a little more height. So I'm going to stick pretty closely with their numbers and see what I get. They did give me the outer width of this frame rail here to here. So I should be able to figure, where that lines up, and you can see where it cuts in back here. It's pretty straightforward. So at the end of the day, this is what it's going to look like. And, the front, I'm obviously not in any problems there, but if you're curious, and you can check them out at scottshotrods.com. And they do chassis for a number of different rigs, square bodies, A bodies, F bodies, everything. So they seem to be pretty easy company to deal with. I don't think they're considerably cheaper than the Roadster shop. Geographically, it's a little easier for me because it's in Tennessee, and I got some family down there and whatnot. But anyway, their offering looks good. I do. At first I was a little taken aback by having to cut that frame rail out, but now I'm like, but this is going to tuck up. These frame rails are going to tuck up into that body a lot nicer than trying to hang down below it. So we're going to go see what happens. So at the end of the day, I'm going to go back through and do a Rev 3 and alter the GM spec to the new sheet that I got from Scott's, not necessarily the original one. And I think all the errors come out much, much closer. But I think, at the end of the day, I have to pay attention to what they've got, because that's the frame that I'm going to be bolting this chassis to. Again, all the XYs and the cross dimensions were fine. It was only the heights that I'm reworking here a little bit to try to, make it more adaptable and make it more a better fit. That's all I've been trying to do. So yeah, that should clear it up, clear as mud, right? Boring as hell. But at the end of the day, that's where I'm at. I think that's the smart play at this point. Again, if you're interested in this stuff, this is probably pretty useful because I've looked a lot for this. But if you're not, then I get it. This is pretty mundane, but if you're building one of these, as I'm trying to do from scratch, pretty much, you need to know this. So, all right, I'll take you back.
Okay, I know that was a lot. I'm sorry. It just is what it is. So after all of that, the changes that I have that are different from my original chassis is pretty minimal. So the D1, D2 marker here, I'm going to go up 5/16 of an inch on these. And what I'm calling X1, X2, which are the back of the front subframe, here and here, I am going down 3/8. I figure the way that the Scott's chassis has the 4 rear trailing arms, that cheating this side, if I'm going to do anything, I'm going to go to the high side on the front of the rear frame rail and just provide myself as much room as I can. They don't actually have a mounting point in here, so I'm safe there. What I think there's a way for me to make one, but that's that. Now, this whole thing from Scott's didn't come without surprises as well. It turns out that you have to remove part of the rear frame rail for the Scott's system, the Scott's chassis. On the Roadster chassis, it bolts in, all on the same body mount points. What Scott's does, however, is it provides, I like it a little better. And at first I'm like, oh, it's going to be a pain. But by removing part of the rear frame rail to accommodate this new full frame, it sits a lot lower. You can get the frame up in there higher. You don't have any interferences. I think it's going to be a better product in the end. I just, I'm struggling with welding in brand new frame rails, and here they are sitting on the tub, and welding those onto the new trunk floor and everything, only to cut parts of them back out. So I think what I'm going to do is, weld in the areas that are going to stay, then just sheet metal screw the areas that are not, maybe throw a few spot welds in here or there, but just try to sum it up the best I can. And they also did give me the width of the rear frame rails, so I'm not sure exactly how much I'm going to need to take out, but I'm gonna map all that out and draw it on the bottom of the floor pans and all of that when I get going on it. But first things first, I'm going to go back through and get these pads to the right heights, get everything cleaned up, get one final run on the laser here at the heights I'm at right now, get everything sorted out so that when I set that body on here now, ultimately when the body comes down on this floor, it's going to sit level on all the bracing I put in there, except for those angled ones, obviously. But all that bracing was built level with those rockers. So those rockers are God in this case. Those are the be-all, end-all. I've got those set level. We'll see what happens, but I'm pretty confident based on everything that Juby teaches us and everything else. I think I'm going to be okay. There's really no hard points here stopping it from going up and down other than these rear brackets here for the cocktail shakers right here. There's a hard stop here that hits the trunk floor. Other than that, there's nothing all the way down through this thing. So I should be able to manage it. I think I'm making a little too much out of this. But, just trying to be careful. Putting a lot of time, effort, and expense into this. I don't want to do it wrong. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm going to go back through it once again, take the firewall off, run the laser, get everything leveled up one more time, and then we're ready to start assembly tomorrow.